Outside a crowded courthouse on a rainy morning, a black man named Ethan Cole sat in cuffs, bruised and silent, arrested for allegedly assaulting officers after helping a woman in danger. When arrogant Officer Brandt deliberately kicked him in open court, forcing him to his knees while the gallery laughed, Ethan simply rose and stared at the American flag with something heavy in his eyes. His overworked public defender Rachel noticed things that didn't add up: a 12-year gap in his background, a cryptic tattoo, and a calm that seemed almost too controlled. The cops thought they were humiliating a nobody. They had no idea that one phone call to the Pentagon was about to reveal exactly who they'd been kicking around. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The rain came down in cold sheets that Tuesday morning, turning the courthouse steps into a slick obstacle course of umbrellas and briefcases. Downtown traffic choked the streets while protesters gathered near the entrance, their signs wilting in the downpour. Lawyers in expensive suits dodged puddles. Police officers clustered under the concrete overhang, sipping coffee and checking their phones. Defendants shuffled through security in various states of resignation and defiance. Among them was a man who drew no particular attention at first glance. Ethan Cole sat in the back of the transport van, wrists cuffed in front of him, clothes rumpled and torn at the shoulder. His face carried the purple shadow of a bruise along his jawline, not fresh but not quite healed either. The kind that comes from a fist, not a fall. His eyes were dark brown and steady, fixed on nothing in particular as the van door opened and rain misted inside. "Let's go," the officer said, not unkindly but not gentle either. "Watch your step." Ethan moved carefully, shoulders square despite the restraints. There was something about the way he carried himself that didn't quite match the circumstances. His back remained straight. His breathing stayed even. When his feet hit the wet pavement, he didn't hunch against the rain like the others. He simply walked. Inside the courthouse holding area, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional green that made everyone look sick. Metal benches lined the walls. The smell of old coffee mixed with cleaning solution and anxiety. Officers moved through the space with the easy confidence of people who owned it. Ethan sat on the bench closest to the wall, hands resting on his knees. He didn't fidget, didn't talk, didn't try to catch anyone's eye. Around him, other defendants complained loudly about their arrests, their lawyers, the system. Ethan just sat. "Hey," one of the officers called over, a younger guy with a crew cut and a smirk. "You hearing impaired or something?" Ethan looked up briefly. "No, sir." "Sir," the officer laughed. "Polite one. That's new." He turned to his partner. "Think maybe he's actually guilty for once." The partner, older and heavier, shrugged. "They always are, Danny. They just don't usually admit it." Ethan's gaze returned to the middle distance. His posture never changed. If anything, he sat even straighter, like someone accustomed to holding position for hours. The kind of stillness that came from training, not fear. It made the officers uncomfortable in a way they couldn't quite name. "What did he do?" the younger officer asked, flipping through clipboard. "Says here he assaulted 2 officers during a domestic disturbance call." The older one read. "Resisted arrest. Made threats. Don't look like much of a fighter to me." "They never do until they swing." Ethan said nothing. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he didn't take the bait. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. The holding area filled up as the morning docket loaded. Public defenders arrived with overstuffed briefcases and tired eyes. Rachel Brennan was one of them. She was 32, a public defender for 6 years, running on 4 hours of sleep and gas station coffee. Her caseload was ridiculous. Her resources were non-existent, and she'd just been handed another file 10 minutes before she walked into the holding area. "Ethan Cole," she called out, scanning the room. Ethan stood. Rachel took him in quickly. Mid to late 30s. Calm, bruised, clothes that had seen better days but weren't dirty. No visible tattoos on his forearms. No aggressive body language. He met her eyes directly but without challenge. "I'm Rachel Brennan, Public Defender's Office. I'll be representing you today." She gestured toward a small interview room. We don't have much time. Inside the cramped room, Rachel dropped her bag on the table and pulled out his file. It was thin, too thin. Okay, Mr. Cole, I need to understand what happened. The report says you intervened in an altercation and then assaulted responding officers. Is that accurate? No, ma'am. What part isn't accurate? The assault. Rachel rubbed her temples. They're charging you with felony assault on a police officer. That's serious. I need more than know if we're going to fight this. Ethan leaned back slightly. I stopped two men from hurting a woman. When the police arrived, they didn't ask questions. They assumed I was the threat. Did you resist arrest? I didn't resist. I tried to explain. And the officers claim you became aggressive and physical. They're wrong. Rachel studied him. There was something about his tone. No anger. No defensiveness. Just flat certainty. Like someone reporting facts. Mr. Cole, juries don't trust silence. Judges don't like vague answers. I need details. I need context. I need something I can work with. Ethan met her gaze. I didn't hurt anyone who didn't deserve protecting. That's not helpful. It's the truth. Rachel felt frustration rising. The truth needs evidence. Witnesses. Something more than your word against two uniformed officers. There was a girl, Ethan said quietly. The one I helped. She ran when the siren started. Find her. Do you have a name? Description. Young. White. 20 maybe. Brown hair. She was bleeding from her lip. Rachel made notes. Where did this happen exactly? Ethan gave her the intersection. Rachel recognized it. Not a great neighborhood. Not the worst either. The kind of place where things happened and people minded their business. Anything else you can tell me? About yourself? Work history? Character witnesses? No, ma'am. No. Just no. Ethan's expression didn't change. I keep to myself. Rachel closed the file with more force than necessary. Mr. Cole, I'm going to be honest with you. This looks bad. The prosecutor is going to paint you as a violent offender. The officers will testify against you. Without something to counter that narrative, you're looking at serious time. I understand. Do you? Because you're not acting like it. For the first time, something flickered behind Ethan's eyes. Not anger. Something deeper. Something older. I know how courts work, he said quietly. The way he said it made Rachel pause. Not arrogant. Not threatening. Just certain. Like someone who'd seen this before. Been through this before. Maybe not in a courtroom, but somewhere that mattered just as much. Before she could press further, a knock came at the door. Time was up. In the hallway outside the courtroom, the morning chaos continued. Lawyers negotiated plea deals. Families waited on hard benches. Officers stood in clusters, talking and laughing. One officer stood out. Sergeant Michael Brandt was 43, white, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that filled a room. His uniform was crisp. His badge shined. He had the look of a man who'd been decorated multiple times and knew it. When he talked, other officers listened. When he laughed, they laughed with him. Right now, he was holding court near the water fountain, telling a story to three younger officers. So this guy, Brandt was saying, voice-carrying, this tough guy, he's giving us the whole speech, right? You don't know who I am. I've got rights. You can't do this. The usual garbage. He paused for effect. 2 minutes later, he's crying for his mama in the back of the cruiser. The other officers laughed. They're all the same, Brandt continued. Big mouths until real men show up. Then they fold. Ethan emerged from the interview room at that moment, escorted by a bailiff. He walked with that same measured calm, hands still cuffed in front. Brandt's eyes locked onto him immediately. Well, Brandt said, loud enough to carry. Look who decided to show up. He pushed out from the wall and angled directly into Ethan's path. The bailiff tried to guide Ethan around, but Brandt was already there, shoulder checking him as they passed. Not hard enough to justify a response. Just enough to make a point. Ethan stopped, absorbed the contact, didn't push back. Brandt leaned in close, voice dropping to something only Ethan could hear. Fake tough guys like you make me sick. Think you're soldiers or something. You're nothing, and everyone's about to see it. Ethan's jaw tightened, just barely, just enough. But he said nothing. Brandt smiled, satisfied, and stepped back. The other officers watched, some uncomfortable, others amused. This was Brandt's show, and they knew their roles. Inside the courtroom, Judge Harold Winters presided with the efficiency of a man who'd seen everything twice. He was running behind schedule, which meant everyone was irritable. The gallery was half full with families, journalists, and the casually curious. Defendants were called up one by one. Charges read. Pleas entered. Bail set or denied. The machinery of justice grinding forward. Rachel sat at the defense table, reviewing her notes one more time. Ethan would be called soon. She still didn't have enough. No weaknesses. No contradicting evidence. Just his word and a victim who disappeared. Brandt and two other officers stood along the wall near the jury box, as they often did for cases involving police testimony. Brandt's posture was relaxed, confident. He knew how this would go. The people versus Ethan Cole, the clerk called. The bailiff guided Ethan toward the defense table. He moved carefully, mindful of the chains connecting his wrist cuffs to his waist restraints. The courtroom watched with varying degrees of interest. As Ethan passed Brandt's position, the sergeant shifted his weight and deliberately hooked his boot behind Ethan's ankle. The kick wasn't subtle. It was meant to humiliate. Ethan stumbled forward, losing balance, and went down hard on one knee in front of everyone. The chains rattled. A few people in the gallery gasped. Others laughed, nervous and uncertain. Rachel shot to her feet. Your Honor. Mr. Cole, get up, please, the judge said, already annoyed. Ethan stayed down for a moment. His head was bowed. His breathing had changed, deeper and more controlled, like someone fighting to stay calm. Slowly, he pushed himself back to his feet. He straightened his spine, adjusted his cuffs, and then did something unexpected. He looked up, not at Brandt, not at the judge, at the American flag hanging behind the bench. For several seconds, he just stared at it. His expression shifted into something heavier, something that carried weight Rachel couldn't quite name. Loss, maybe, or betrayal, or both. Then he moved to the defense table and sat down without a word. Rachel leaned close. Are you okay? I'm Phoenix. That was deliberate. I can file. Don't. Mr. Cole. Please. Just don't. The judge banged his gavel. Counsel, are we ready to proceed? Rachel wanted to argue, wanted to demand accountability. But Ethan's expression stopped her. This wasn't surrender. This was strategy. Or survival. She couldn't tell which. Yes, Your Honor, she said quietly. The preliminary hearing began. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Linda Hayes, laid out the charges with practiced precision. Assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, disorderly conduct. She painted Ethan as a dangerous individual who'd escalated a situation and attacked law enforcement. The defendant has no stable address, Your Honor. No employment records we can verify. No ties to the community. He represents a flight risk and a public safety concern. Judge Winters looked over his glasses at Ethan. Mr. Cole, do you have anything to say to these charges? Ethan stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. Noted. Bail is set at $50,000. Preliminary trial date will be. Your Honor, Rachel interrupted. My client cannot afford that bail. He has no prior criminal record. This amount is excessive for. Counsel, he's charged with assaulting police officers. The bail stands. Rachel sat back down, defeated. The rest of the morning proceeded with bureaucratic efficiency. Brandt was called to testify about the arrest. He was polished, confident, every inch the decorated sergeant. We responded to a call about an altercation, Brandt explained. When we arrived, we found the defendant standing over two men, aggressive posture, fists clenched. The victims had fled. We ordered him to stand down. He refused. What happened next? Hayes asked. He became verbally abusive, started moving toward us. We had to physically restrain him for everyone's safety. Did he resist? Violently. Rachel scribbled notes. It was a clean story. Too clean. Officer Brandt, she said when her turn came, you said the victims had fled. Did you attempt to locate them? We secured the immediate threat first. But you didn't look for witnesses? The situation was volatile, Counselor. Did your body cam capture the incident? Brandt hesitated. Just a fraction. Yes. May we see that footage? Hayes stood. Your Honor, the footage is being processed as evidence. It will be available for discovery. When? Rachel pressed. In due time. Judge Winters looked tired. Counsel, file the appropriate motions. We'll address evidence submissions at the next hearing. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down. As Ethan was let out, he glanced once more at the flag. Then at Brant. Brant grinned. That night, Rachel sat in her cramped office, surrounded by case files and cold coffee. She'd sent her intern to canvass the neighborhood where Ethan was arrested. Maybe someone saw something. Maybe the victim could be found. She pulled up Ethan's background check again on her laptop. The information was sparse. No criminal history, which was good, but everything else was strange. No long employment record. No social media presence. No permanent address in years. And then there was a gap. From age 22 to age 34, there was almost nothing. No tax returns. No documented work. No records of any kind. People didn't just disappear for 12 years. Rachel leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. She thought about the way Ethan sat, the way he breathed, the way he'd stayed calm even when humiliated in open court. She thought about what he'd said, "I know how courts work." And then, quietly, almost to herself, she whispered, "Who are you?" Her phone buzzed. A text from her intern. Found hospital records. Girl, treated night of arrest. Name, Lena Whitmore. Getting contact info. Rachel sat up straighter. Finally, something. She texted back, "Good work. Let me know as soon as you have more." Then she returned to Ethan's file, clicking through pages, looking for anything she'd missed. There were scars mentioned in the booking photos. Old scars, the kind that told stories. She pulled up the body cam request form and filed it officially, marking it urgent. Then she called the prosecutor's office and left a message requesting expedited discovery. Something about this case felt wrong. Not just unfair. Wrong. And Rachel Brennan had learned long ago to trust that feeling. The next morning, court resumed with the same chaos. Rachel arrived early, hoping to catch Ethan before proceedings began. She needed to ask him directly about the 12-year gap, about the scars, about why a man with no record and no history would end up in this situation. When Ethan was brought in, he looked the same. Calm, steady, unshaken. "I need to ask you something," Rachel said as soon as they were alone. "Your background. There's a gap. A big one. Nearly 12 years where you just don't exist on paper." Ethan's expression didn't change. "Some people live off the grid. Not like this. This is different." "Why does it matter?" "Because juries need to know who you are. Right now, the prosecution is building a narrative that you're a drifter, a nobody, someone with nothing to lose. If I can show them you had a life, a career, something stable." "You can't." "Why not?" Ethan met her eyes. "Because some people are trained to disappear." Rachel felt a chill run through her. "Trained by who?" Before he could answer, the bailiff knocked. Time was up again. In court, Hayes called Brant back to the stand to provide additional context. He repeated his story with the same confidence, adding small details that made it sound more credible. The way Ethan's fists were clenched, the threatening tone of his voice, the wild look in his eyes. Each detail was delivered with the practiced ease of someone who'd testified hundreds of times. Brant knew exactly how to play to a jury, how to pause for effect, how to look directly at them when making his most damning points. Rachel watched the jury's faces. They were buying it. Every word. "Officer Brant," Hayes said, "in your professional experience, would you say the defendant posed an immediate threat?" "Absolutely," Brant replied without hesitation. "I've been doing this 20 years. You learn to read situations." He was escalating. "If we hadn't intervened when we did, someone could have been seriously hurt." "Thank you, officer." No further questions. Rachel stood for cross-examination. "Officer Brant, you mentioned reading situations. Did you attempt to de-escalate before using physical force?" "We gave him multiple commands." "How many?" "Several." "Can you give me a number?" Brant shifted slightly. "I didn't count them, counselor. We were focused on securing the scene." "Was Mr. Cole armed?" "Not that we recovered." "Did he threaten you verbally?" His entire demeanor was threatening. "That's not what I asked." "Did he make verbal threats?" Brant's jaw tightened. He was non-compliant. "That's still not an answer to my question." Judge Winters interrupted. "Counselor, move on." Rachel switched tactics. "Officer Brant, were you wearing a functioning body camera during this arrest?" "Yes." and that camera would have recorded the entire interaction. That's what it's for. So we'll be able to see exactly how many commands were given and whether Mr. Cole was actually threatening. Hayes stood. Objection. Asked and answered. Sustained. Rachel knew she was losing ground, but she pressed anyway. Officer, have you ever had complaints filed against you? Objection. Hayes's voice rose. Relevance. Goes to credibility, Your Honor. Overruled. Answer the question, Officer Brandt. Brandt's expression hardened. I've had complaints. Every cop has. None have been sustained. How many? I don't recall the exact number. More than 5. Possibly. More than 10. Your Honor. Hayes interjected. This is badgering. I'll allow one more question on this line. Rachel looked directly at Brandt. Officer, have any of those complaints involved excessive force? The silence stretched for a moment too long. Some complainants claimed that. None were substantiated. Rachel sat down, knowing she'd planted a seed of doubt. It wasn't much, but it was something. When Hayes submitted a partial body cam clip, Rachel objected immediately. Your Honor, if reviewing body cam footage, it should be complete and unedited. This is all that was recovered, Hayes said smoothly. The rest of the file appears to have been corrupted. How convenient. Judge Winters sighed. Counsel approached. At the bench, he spoke quietly. Ms. Brennan, I understand your frustration, but these things happen with digital files. Unless you have evidence of tampering, we proceed with what we have. Your Honor, my client's freedom is at stake. If there's more footage, file a motion. We're not doing this now. Rachel returned to her seat, jaw clenched. The partial footage played on the courtroom monitors. It showed Ethan from the officer's perspective, approaching them with his hands raised. But the beginning was missing. So was the audio at key moments. The clip made it look confrontational because there was no context. When it ended, Hayes rested her case for the preliminary hearing. Rachel called no witnesses. She had none. During recess, Brandt cornered her in the hallway, arms crossed, blocking her path. Counselor, he said, voice low, you seem like a smart woman. Smart enough to know when you're fighting a losing battle. Rachel met his gaze. Is that a threat, Officer Brandt? It's advice. Your client should really take a plea. Things get complicated when people push too hard. I'll pass that along. Brandt smiled and walked away. That evening, Rachel finally got the call from her intern. I found her, Lena Whitmore. She's at a women's shelter downtown. She's willing to talk. Rachel grabbed her coat. I'm on my way. The shelter was a converted church basement, warm but worn. Women and children moved through the space quietly. A counselor led Rachel to a small private room where Lena sat, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She was young, maybe 21, with brown hair pulled back and healing bruises visible on her neck. When Rachel showed her Ethan's booking photo, Lena's eyes filled with tears. That's him, she whispered. He saved me. Tell me what happened. Lena's story poured out. She'd been walking home from work. 2 men followed her, cornered her in an alley, started grabbing at her, saying awful things. She screamed. Then Ethan appeared. He didn't yell, didn't threaten. He just stepped between them and told them to leave. When one of the men swung at him, Ethan moved so fast Lena barely saw it. Suddenly the guy was on the ground, holding his wrist. The other man ran. Ethan helped Lena up, asked if she was hurt, and told her to wait while he called the police. But when the sirens came, everything changed. The officers arrived, already aggressive. They saw Ethan, a black man, standing in an alley. They saw the man on the ground. They didn't ask questions. They rushed Ethan. He didn't fight back, Lena said, crying now. He just kept saying, I'm the one who called you, but they didn't care. They threw him down. And when I tried to tell them he helped me, one of the officers told me to go home. Said he wasn't my hero. He was the problem. Rachel wrote frantically. Which officer said that? The big one. The one who seemed in charge. Can you identify him? I think so. Rachel showed her a photo lineup. Lena pointed immediately to Brandt. Him. He's the one who told me to leave. And he was the one kicking. She stopped. Kicking what? Kicking him. While he was on the ground. I heard it. The sound. Rachel felt sick. Lena, I need you to testify. Can you do that? Lena nodded. He saved me. I'm not letting them destroy him for that. Rachel left the shelter with renewed purpose. She had her witness. She had her story. Now, she just needed the evidence. But when she got home that night, there was a message waiting. Her motion for full body cam disclosure had been delayed. No reason given. Rachel sat at her kitchen table, staring at the case file. Every system was quietly leaning against them. Every door closing just slightly too soon. This wasn't incompetence. This was intentional. She thought about Ethan's words. Some people are trained to disappear. She pulled up her laptop and started searching military databases, veterans' resources, anything that might give her a clue. Hours later, exhausted, she found something that stopped her cold. In one of Ethan's booking photos, his sleeve had ridden up slightly. There, on his inner forearm, was a tattoo. Numbers. Small, precise, faded black ink. Not coordinates. These numbers didn't follow any geographic pattern. They looked more like dates. Or codes. Rachel grabbed her phone and texted her investigator contact. Need to ID a tattoo. Military maybe. Can you help? The response came quickly. Send photo. She did. 3 dots appeared. Then stopped. Then appeared again. Finally. Where did you get this? Rachel's pulse quickened. Client. What? Meet me tomorrow. Not over text. She stared at her phone, then back at the photo. Something was there. Something significant. Marcus had worked gang units and internal affairs. For him to be cautious about a tattoo meant this went deeper than she'd imagined. Rachel looked at the clock. 2 in the morning. She should sleep. But her mind raced. She pulled up Ethan's file one more time. The sparse information felt like intentional erasure. Someone had gone to great lengths to make sure Ethan Cole existed only on the surface. But why? And who had that kind of power? She thought about Brandt's behavior. The way he targeted Ethan specifically. It wasn't standard cop arrogance. There was recognition there. Rachel closed her laptop and sat in darkness, listening to the rain. Tomorrow she'd meet Marcus. Tomorrow she'd learn what that tattoo meant. But tonight, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd stumbled into something much larger than a simple assault case. The rain continued. Somewhere across the city, Ethan sat in his cell, breathing in measured counts. And somewhere in the machinery of justice, gears were beginning to turn. Then she closed her laptop and sat in the dark, thinking. Somewhere in the city, Ethan Cole sat in a holding cell, staring at the ceiling. He didn't sleep much anymore. Hadn't for years. The insomnia had started long before the arrest, back when night water and helicopters filled his dreams. He thought about Lena, about how she'd run when the sirens came. He hoped she was safe. Hoped she'd found somewhere the men who'd attacked her couldn't find her. He'd seen that look in her eyes before, the kind of fear that doesn't leave easily. He thought about Brandt, about the recognition in the man's eyes, the way he'd said fake soldiers, plural, like it was something Brandt had encountered before. Some people just knew. They recognized the training even when you try to hide it. The way you stood, the way you breathed, the way you could take a kick and stay absolutely silent. And that meant this wasn't over. Ethan closed his eyes and controlled his breathing. For counts in, for counts hold, for counts out. The way he'd been taught in training so long ago it felt like someone else's life. Faces of men he'd served with. Voices over radios. The weight of equipment that had become a second skin. Outside, rain started falling again, tapping against the small window high up on the wall. The sound reminded him of rain on a boat deck. Of missions that started in weather just like this. And somewhere in the courthouse files, a request was being processed. A request that would change everything. Rachel Brennan had filed the body cam request 3 times now, each time with more aggressive language. Eventually, someone would have to respond. But not yet. Tonight, Ethan sat in a cell designed to break people's spirits. Concrete walls, metal toilet, thin mattress. But he'd been in worse places. What bothered him wasn't the confinement. It was the injustice. He'd saved someone, protected someone, done exactly what he'd been trained to do. And now he was being punished for it by the very system he'd once sworn to defend. Outside the cell block, a guard made his rounds. Keys jangled. A door slammed somewhere in the distance. Ethan stared at the ceiling again. He'd been patient before. He could be patient now. But patience had limits. The morning after Rachel's late-night discovery, She met Marcus at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the courthouse. He'd chosen a corner table away from windows, his back to the wall like someone who'd spent too many years learning to watch exits. Marcus was 48, former LAPD, with gray threading through his dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. When Rachel slid into the seat across from him, he was already studying the photo she'd sent. "Tell me about your client," he said without preamble. Rachel kept her voice low. "Ethan Cole, arrested for assault on police officers. Claims he was protecting a woman. Has almost no background for 12 years. Marcus set the phone down carefully. "This tattoo, you know what it is? Numbers. I thought maybe coordinates. They're not." Marcus pulled out a notepad and sketched something. "See the spacing? The groupings? This is Memorial Ink. Military. Each set of numbers represents something personal. Usually dates. Sometimes initials converted to numbers. So he was military. More than that." Marcus tapped the photo. "This style, this placement, this encoding method, I've only seen it a handful of times. Special operations. The kind that don't officially exist." Rachel felt her pulse quicken. "You're sure?" "I spent 3 years on a federal task force. We worked adjacent to some classified units. Never learned their real names, but you learn to recognize the signs." He looked at her directly. "Your client didn't just serve. He operated. And if he's got 12 years of blank history, that wasn't unemployment. That was deployment you'll never find records for. Then why is he sitting in county lockup being kicked around by a cop?" Marcus closed his notepad. "Because either nobody knows who he is, or somebody knows exactly who he is and wants him buried." The words hung between them. "Which one do you think it is?" Rachel asked. "Find out who arrested him. Find out if there's any overlap with military or federal law enforcement in their background. If there is." Marcus stood. "Then you're not dealing with a simple assault case. You're dealing with something deliberate." Rachel drove straight to the women's shelter where Lena was staying. The intern had arranged for her to be there during morning hours when the building was less chaotic. The shelter director, a tired woman named Susan, led Rachel to a small counseling room. Lena sat on a worn couch, hands clasped in her lap. She looked younger in daylight, more fragile. The bruises on her neck had started to yellow around the edges. "Lena, thank you for agreeing to see me," Rachel said, sitting across from her. "I know this is difficult. Is he okay?" Lena asked immediately. "Mr. Cole, is he hurt? He's been mistreated, but he's managing. I need to ask you some questions about that night." Lena nodded, twisting her hands together. "Start from the beginning. What were you doing before the attack?" "I was walking home from my shift. I work at a diner on 5th Street. It was late, maybe 11. The bus dropped me off 6 blocks from my apartment." Lena's voice was steady but quiet. "I noticed 2 men following me after 3 blocks. White guys, maybe late 20s. Dressed casual. One had a baseball cap. Did they say anything?" "At first, no. They just kept pace behind me. I crossed the street twice. They crossed too. I started walking faster." Lena's breathing quickened. "Then they caught up, started saying things. Crude things. Asked where I was going. If I wanted company." Rachel took notes. "What happened next?" "I told them to leave me alone. One of them grabbed my arm, pulled me toward an alley. I screamed. The other one covered my mouth." Tears started sliding down Lena's face. I thought that was it. Then Ethan appeared?" Lena nodded, wiping her eyes. "He came from nowhere. Just stepped between us. He didn't yell or threaten. He just said, very calm, 'Let her go.' The guy holding me laughed, called him names, said he should mind his business." "Did Ethan respond?" "He repeated it. 'Let her go. Walk away. Nobody has to get hurt.'" His voice was so calm, it was almost scary. Like he'd done this before. Like he knew exactly how it would end. Rachel leaned forward. "What did the men do?" The one in the cap swung at him. Just swung hard at his face. Lena's eyes widened at the memory. Mr. Cole moved so fast. 1 second the guy was swinging, the next he was on the ground holding his arm. I didn't even see what happened. It was just movement. Efficient. And the other man? He ran. Just took off. Mr. Cole helped me up, asked if I was hurt, asked where the nearest hospital was. He pulled out a phone and started calling 911. He told me to wait, that help was coming. Did he seem aggressive? Threatening? No. Lena was emphatic. He was gentle, professional, like I don't know, like a medic or something. He kept asking if I was okay, if I needed to sit down. He gave me his jacket because I was shaking. Rachel made a note. This matched nothing in the police report. When did the police arrive? Maybe 5 minutes later. 2 cars. 4 officers. They came in fast, lights everywhere. Lena's expression darkened. Mr. Cole had his hands up immediately. He called out that he was the one who called them, that the woman was safe. But they didn't listen. What did they do? They rushed him, yelled at him to get on the ground. He was trying to explain, but they tackled him, threw him down hard. He hit the pavement, and I heard it. That thud. Lena was crying again. I started screaming that he saved me, that he didn't do anything wrong. One of the officers, the big one with the sergeant stripes, he turned to me and said, "Go home, miss. He's not your hero. He's the problem." Rachel's pen stopped. He said that exactly? Word for word. Then another officer, younger guy, he tried to escort me away. Kept saying it was a crime scene, that I needed to give them space. I asked if I could give a statement. He said they'd contact me if needed. Lena wiped her face. Nobody ever did. Did you see what happened after they took Ethan down? Lena hesitated. I saw them kicking. I heard him, not screaming, but making sounds. Pain sounds. And he wasn't fighting back. He wasn't doing anything. He just laid there and took it. Rachel felt sick. Lena, I need you to testify. In court. Tell a judge and jury exactly what you just told me. Will I be safe? I'll do everything I can to protect you. Lena looked down at her hands. Someone threw a rock through the shelter window last night. There was a note. It said to stay out of it. Rachel's blood went cold. Did you report it? Susan called the police. They said it was probably just random vandalism. Took a report and left. Do you still have a note? Susan does. She kept it. Rachel stood. I need to see it. And Lena, I'm filing for protective custody today. You're not staying here unguarded. 20 minutes later, Susan handed Rachel a plastic bag containing a crumpled piece of paper. The message was printed in block letters. Stay out of it. Rachel photographed it, then called her office to file an emergency motion. This was witness intimidation. This was obstruction. This was everything wrong with the case crystallized into 4 words. Back at the courthouse, Rachel found Ethan in a holding room between hearings. He looked the same as always. Calm, controlled. But there was something different in his eyes today. Something heavier. I found Lena, Rachel said, sitting across from him. She's willing to testify. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, not in relief, in what looked like dread. She told me what happened, how you helped her, how the police attacked you without cause, how Brant specifically told her you were the problem. She shouldn't testify, Ethan said quietly. What? Why not? She's the key to your defense. Because they won't let her. Rachel leaned forward. Ethan, what does that mean? It means this is bigger than one arrest. Bigger than one cop with an attitude. Then help me understand. Tell me what's happening. Ethan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Someone threw a rock through her shelter window, didn't they? Rachel froze. How did you know that? Because that's what happens when you threaten to expose something people want buried. Ethan met her eyes. They're sending a message. Back off or people get hurt. Who? Who's sending that message? I don't know exactly, but I know the pattern. I know the tactics. I recognize the moves. Rachel felt frustration rising. Ethan, I can't protect you if you won't talk to me. I can't build a defense on silence and vague warnings. I need facts. I need context. I need to know who you are. You already know enough. You found the tattoo. You had it analyzed. Rachel startled. How did you? Because I know how lawyers work. You're thorough. You're smart. And you're not the type to give up. Ethan's expression softened slightly. Marcus is a good investigator. Former LAPD, Federal Task Force experience. He told you what that ink means. You're military. Special operations. The kind with no official record. Ethan nodded slowly. Was. Past tense. Were you Navy? Another pause. Then, almost reluctantly, Naval Special Warfare. The words landed like stones. Rachel had heard the term before. SEALs. DevGru. The units that operated in complete darkness. The operators whose faces never appeared in news reports. whose missions remained classified decades after completion. How long, she asked. 13 years. Active duty for 8. Contractor work for 5 after that. Doing what? Things I can't talk about. Things I signed papers saying I'd never talk about. Things that would get people killed if I talked about them. Rachel sat back, processing. The 12-year gap in your background. That was all military. Deployed mostly. Some training stateside. Some work overseas that doesn't exist on paper. And the tattoo? Ethan's jaw tightened. Names. Men I served with. Men who didn't come back. The weight of that statement filled the small room. How many? Rachel asked softly. 7. Over different missions. Different years. All good men. I am sorry. Ethan looked away. I wear them so somebody remembers. So their families know someone carried their names forward, even if we can't tell anyone what really happened to them. Rachel felt tears threatening, but held them back. This wasn't the time. Ethan, if your service record is classified, it could explain everything. Why you have no background. Why you know how courts work. Why you move the way you do. It explains why I don't fight back when cops hit me too. Because I know what happens when people like me raise our hands against authority. The system isn't built to believe us. It's built to contain us. But your record could prove you're credible. Could show the jury who you really are. My record is sealed. DOD won't release it without clearance I don't have anymore. Then we'll file for it. Emergency subpoena. National security justification. Whatever it takes. Ethan shook his head. Rachel, listen to me. The moment you file that request, you put a target on your back too. These things don't get unsealed easily. And the people who want them sealed, they don't play fair. I don't care. You save someone's life, and you're being crucified for it. If your military record can prove your character, we're getting it. You don't understand what you're asking for. Then make me understand. Ethan was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to come from somewhere deep and old. 6 years ago, I was part of a mission. Can't tell you where. Can't tell you why. What I can tell you is that the intelligence was wrong. We were sent into a situation based on political interests, not operational reality. My team leader questioned it. Command overruled him. He paused, hands clenching slightly. We went in anyway, because that's what you do. You trust the chain of command. You trust that the people sending you believe in the mission. His voice went flat. We walked into a trap. Not an enemy trap, a bureaucratic one. The target we were sent to extract wasn't what we were told. The civilians we were ordered to avoid were actually the ones who needed protecting. Everything was backwards. Rachel listened, barely breathing. My team did what we always did. We adapted. We got the civilians out. But in doing so, we exposed what the original mission really was. Who had ordered it? Why it was designed the way it was. Ethan's eyes were distant now, seeing something years and thousands of miles away. When we got back, we were told to keep quiet. Told the mission was classified beyond our clearance. Told that discussing it with anyone, even each other, would result in treason charges. Did you stay quiet? For a while. But my team leader, a man named Jackson, he couldn't let it go. He'd seen what I'd seen, knew what we'd been used for. He started asking questions internally. Started documenting inconsistencies. What happened to him? Training accident. 6 months later. Helicopter malfunction during a routine exercise. Ethan's voice was bitter. 4 other men from my unit died with him. Men who'd been on that mission. Men who'd known what really happened. Rachel felt cold spreading through her chest. You think it wasn't an accident? I know it wasn't. Because the maintenance records were sealed. Because the investigation concluded before it started. Because everyone who survived that crash was reassigned to different units within weeks and told never to discuss it. And you? I was medically retired. Officially for injuries sustained during operations. Unofficially because I'd become a liability. Someone who knew too much and couldn't be trusted to forget. So they just let you go? They let me go because keeping me in would have meant answering questions. Better to pinch me out, seal my records, and hope I disappeared quietly. Ethan looked at Rachel directly. I did disappear. Worked private contracts under different names. Lived off-grid. Stayed away from anything that would put me back in the system. And it worked. For 6 years, it worked. Until you helped Lena. Until I couldn't walk away from someone who needed help. until I did what I was trained to do, and it put me right back where they wanted me. In the system. Vulnerable. Discredited. Rachel's mind was racing. Brant, is he connected to this? I don't know for certain, but the way he looked at me, the things he said, that wasn't random cop hatred. That was recognition. You think he knows about your past? I think he knows enough to be afraid of what I might say, or who I might talk to if I'm pushed too far. Rachel stood, pacing the small room. This is insane. You're talking about conspiracy, cover-ups, political assassinations made to look like accidents. I'm talking about people protecting their careers and their secrets. That's not conspiracy. That's Tuesday in Washington. Then we expose it. We bring it into the light. We make them answer for it. You can't expose what's classified. You can't make dead men testify. You can't prove what's been erased. Ethan's voice was tired. All you can do is put yourself in danger trying. Rachel, stop pacing. I'm filing for your service record tomorrow. Emergency subpoena to Department of Defense. If they deny it, we appeal. If they seal it, we argue transparency. Whatever it takes. Rachel, no, listen to me. I don't care about conspiracies or cover-ups or whatever political game killed your team. I care about keeping you out of prison for something you didn't do. And right now, your military record is the best shot we have at showing the jury who you really are. Ethan studied her face. You realize what you're asking for? The hornet's nest you're about to kick. I realize exactly what I'm doing. And you're willing to risk it? Your career? Your safety? For a client you barely know? Rachel met his eyes. I'm willing to risk it for the truth. For justice. For the principle that a man shouldn't be destroyed for doing the right thing. She sat back down. Besides, you're not the only one who can't walk away from someone who needs help. Something shifted in Ethan's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Respect, maybe, or recognition of a kindred stubbornness. All right, he said quietly. File the motion. Subpoena the records. But Rachel, when this gets ugly, and it will get ugly, you remember I warned you. Noted. And you remember that whatever happens next, you gave me a chance when nobody else would. That matters. Rachel stood to leave, then paused at the door. Those men, the ones in your tattoo, what would they think about you staying silent? About you letting the system grind you down? Ethan looked at his forearm, at the numbers etched into his skin. They tell me to survive, to protect the mission, to do whatever it takes to come home. Maybe, Rachel said, or maybe they tell you that some fights are worth having, that some truths are worth the cost. She left before he could respond. That afternoon, Rachel filed an emergency motion to subpoena Ethan's military service record from the Department of Defense. She cited his right to present exculpatory evidence, the need to establish character and credibility, and the fundamental fairness required in a criminal proceeding. The motion was 50 pages long, thoroughly researched, carefully argued. She submitted it through official channels with copies to the prosecutor's office, the judge, and the court clerk. 2 hours later, her phone rang. Ms. Brennan? This is Linda Hayes. The prosecutor's voice was tight. I just received your motion regarding your client's military records. Yes, I'm requesting expedited consideration given the trial timeline. Ms. Brennan, you need to withdraw that motion. Rachel stopped walking. She was halfway to her car. Excuse me? Withdraw it. Today, we can discuss alternative character evidence, but this path is not going to work out the way you think it will. Are you threatening me? I'm advising you, as a professional courtesy. Hayes's voice dropped. Rachel, I've been a prosecutor for 19 years. Your motion was flagged within 30 minutes of filing. I received 3 phone calls telling me to make you withdraw it. People way above my pay grade are watching this case. Who called you? I can't tell you that. But your client's record isn't just sealed. It's locked behind layers of national security classification. You just announced to some very powerful people that you're willing to pry open doors they need kept shut. Then there's something there. Something that proves Ethan's character. Or there's something there that people died to keep secret. Hayes paused. Withdraw the motion. Let me offer your client a reasonable plea. That's the smart play here. And if I don't, then you're making a mistake. A serious one. The line went dead. Rachel called Marcus immediately. I filed the subpoena, she said when he answered. For the military records? Yes. How long ago? 2 hours. And The prosecutor just called me, told me to withdraw it, said it was a mistake. Marcus swore softly. 2 hours. That's fast. Too fast for normal processing. What does that mean? It means someone was watching for exactly this kind of request. It means they have alerts set up. It means your client was right about being a liability they wanted buried. Rachel felt her hands shaking. What do I do? You have 2 choices. Back off and let Ethan take a plea deal. Or push forward and accept that you've just painted a target on both of you. That's not really a choice. I know, but I had to say it anyway. Marcus paused. For what it's worth, I'd push forward too. But Rachel, watch your back. Change your routines. Check your car before you get in it. These people play for keeps. The next morning, the courthouse felt different. Officers who normally nodded at Rachel looked away. Even the bailiffs seemed tense. In the courtroom, Brant stood with 3 other officers along the back wall. When Rachel entered, his eyes tracked her with predatory focus. Judge Winters took the bench. Ms. Brennan, your emergency motion regarding military service records has been reviewed and denied. Rachel's stomach dropped. Your Honor, may I be heard? No. The motion touches on matters of national security beyond this court's jurisdiction. Move on. But Your Honor, my client's character and background are directly relevant. Ms. Brennan, I've made my ruling. The denial had come too fast. No hearing. No argument. Someone with enough power had shut down the judge's consideration. Ethan was brought in moments later. When he saw Rachel's face, he knew. They denied it, he said quietly. Within hours. The judge didn't even allow argument. Hayes approached the defense table. My office is prepared to offer a plea. Misdemeanor assault. Time served. 6 months probation. Your client walks today. Rachel glanced at Ethan. What's the catch? No catch. Just acceptance that continuing this trial isn't in anyone's best interest. You mean it's not in someone's best interest? Hayes met her eyes. Take the deal, Rachel. Let him go home. And if we refuse, then we proceed to trial. And by the time we're done, your client will be facing maximum sentences on every charge. You'll lose badly, and he'll spend years in prison. Hayes walked away. Ethan was quiet. Then he said, she's scared. Of what? Of what happens if the truth starts coming out. She's not the enemy here. She's just the messenger. So what do we do? Ethan looked at the encoded numbers on his forearm. We do what they always did. We push forward. We complete the mission. Rachel felt something shift inside her. Then we go to trial. We put Lena on the stand. We force Brant to explain his behavior. If they want to bury you, they'll do it in broad daylight with everyone watching. Ethan smiled slightly. Jackson would have liked you. Your team leader? Yeah. He never backed down either, even when he should have. Did it get him killed? Probably. But he died standing up. Rachel gathered her files. Then let's make sure you don't have to make the same choice. Court resumed with the prosecution calling its next witness. Rachel listened while her mind worked through strategies and angles. But she also felt something else she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Real purpose. This was why she'd become a lawyer. Not to shuffle papers and negotiate plea deals, but to stand between the powerful and the powerless. To be the voice for someone who'd been forced into silence. If this fight destroyed her career, so be it. If it put her in danger, she'd face it. Because some clients deserved more than the system was willing to give them. And Ethan Cole was one of them. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, replaying everything. Hayes' warning, the judge's immediate denial, the way Brant watched her in court like a predator tracking prey. Maybe she was in over her head. Maybe this was bigger than she could handle. But Ethan had saved someone, had done the right thing, had spent 13 years serving his country in ways no one would ever know about. And now he sat in a cell being destroyed for helping someone in need. If the system wouldn't protect him, she would. Even if it cost her everything. Rachel rolled over and grabbed her phone. She drafted an email to the judge's clerk, formally requesting emergency status for her motion. Then she sent a message to her investigator asking him to compile everything he could find on Officer Brant's background, his service history, his family connections. If there was a link between Brant and Ethan's classified past, she'd find it. She thought about what Marcus had said. Either nobody knows who Ethan is, or somebody knows exactly who he is and wants him buried. The evidence pointed increasingly toward the latter, which meant this case was never about assault. It was about silencing someone who knew too much, about keeping buried secrets that powerful people wanted to stay hidden. Rachel had stumbled into something that went far beyond one courthouse, one arrest, one cop with a grudge. And now she had to decide whether to walk away or fight. But she'd already made that decision in the courtroom, when she'd looked at Ethan and promised to stand with him, when she'd refused Hayes' plea deal, when she'd committed to forcing truth into the light no matter the cost. And if exposing that link brought down fire, so be it. Some fights were worth having. Some truths were worth the cost. Rachel closed her eyes and tried to sleep, knowing tomorrow everything would change, knowing that she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. In his cell, Ethan lay on the thin mattress, staring at the same ceiling. He'd meant every word he'd said to Rachel. The danger was real. The threat was credible. The people who wanted him silent had already killed 7 men to keep their secrets. But Rachel didn't understand yet, didn't fully grasp what she was up against. She would soon, and when she did, Ethan hoped she'd have the sense to walk away. But he knew she wouldn't. She was too much like Jackson, too much like the men whose names were encoded on his arm, too stubborn to quit, too principled to accept injustice. It was exactly the quality that made her a great lawyer, and exactly the quality that would put her in terrible danger. Ethan breathed in for 4 counts, held for 4, released for 4. He protected civilians before, in hostile territory, under enemy fire, against impossible odds. If it came to that, he'd protect Rachel too, even if she never knew it, even if it meant breaking the silence he'd kept for 6 years. Some debts had to be paid, some promises had to be kept, and some truths, no matter how dangerous, had to finally see the light. Tomorrow would bring answers, or would bring war. Either way, the time for hiding was over. The decision came to Rachel in the middle of the night, staring at her laptop screen in her cramped apartment. She tried every conventional avenue, every motion denied, every procedural door slammed shut. The system that was supposed to protect the innocent had been weaponized against Ethan. There was only one option left. She pulled out the slip of paper where she'd written the words Ethan had spoken in that quiet holding room. Words that had seemed almost mythical at the time. Naval Command, Pentagon switchboard, code Black Trident. Her hands trembled as she stared at them. This wasn't filing a motion. This wasn't requesting discovery. This was reaching into the heart of the military establishment and announcing that someone they'd tried to erase still existed. It was reckless, dangerous, career-ending at best. But Ethan had given her the code for a reason. He'd trusted her with it. Rachel grabbed her phone. It was 11 at night. The Pentagon switchboard would be minimally staffed, but it would be operational. It always was. She stepped into her bedroom and closed the door, as if that would somehow contain what she was about to unleash. Then she dialed the main Pentagon number. 3 rings. 4. Then a crisp, professional voice. Pentagon operator. How may I direct your call? Rachel's throat went dry. I need to reach Naval Command. Ma'am, at this hour, most offices are closed. If you'd like to leave a message. Code Black Trident. The line went completely silent. Not hold music. Not clicking. Just absolute, profound silence that stretched for 5 seconds that felt like 5 minutes. Then, ma'am, stay on the line. The voice had changed. No longer casual. No longer routine. Sharp. Alert. Careful. Rachel heard clicking. Transfers. Digital routing that suggested her call was bouncing through multiple systems. Each transfer seemed to increase the weight of what she'd done. Finally, another voice. Male. Older. Authoritative. This is Commander Phillips, Naval Personnel Command. State your name and relationship to the individual in question. Rachel Brennan. I'm an attorney. Public defender. I represent someone who asked me to use that code. State the individual's full name. Ethan Cole. The pause that followed was different. Not confusion. Recognition. Where is he right now, Ms. Brennan? County detention. Criminal court. Downtown. What are the charges? Assault on police officers. Resisting arrest. Another pause. Rachel heard typing in the background. Rapide, urgent typing. Is he injured? The question caught her off guard. Yes. He's been physically mistreated by. Do not elaborate over this line. Is he in immediate physical danger right now? I don't think so. He's in general population holding. Ms. Brennan, I need you to listen carefully. Do not allow your client to be moved from that facility. Do not allow any transfer, any transport, any relocation without your explicit presence and approval. Do you understand? Yes, but we are activating confirmation protocols. Federal officers will arrive at the courthouse within hours. Until they do, you maintain eyes on your client. Is that clear? Crystal clear. Good. What court is handling the case? Rachel gave him Judge Winter's name, the case number, every detail she could think of. One more thing, Ms. Brennan. How did you obtain that code? My client gave it to me. He said to use it if I needed help proving who he was. There was a sound that might have been a sharp exhale, or a laugh, or both. He gave you code Black Trident. Do you understand what that means? No, sir. It means the person you're representing isn't just former military, Ms. Brennan. It means he's protected. It means his service record is sealed at the highest level for operational security reasons. And it means that by using that code, you just triggered notifications that go all the way to the Secretary of Defense. Rachel's legs went weak. She sat down hard on her bed. I just wanted to help him. You did. But you also just announced to some very interested parties that Ethan Cole is alive, in custody, and has an attorney willing to go to war for him. Be prepared for that to get complicated. It's already complicated. It's about to get worse. Stay with your client. We're coming. The line went dead. Rachel sat in the darkness of her bedroom, phone still pressed to her ear, trying to process what had just happened. She'd expected bureaucracy, maybe a runaround, possibly a dismissal. Instead, she'd gotten immediate action. Urgent concern. Military protocols activating. Ethan wasn't just a former SEAL. He was someone important enough that using his code triggered emergency responses. She looked at the clock. Just past 11. Court wouldn't resume until 9 in the morning. That gave the Pentagon 10 hours. Rachel grabbed her car keys. She wasn't waiting until morning. If Commander Phillips wanted eyes on Ethan, she'd provide them. The courthouse at midnight was eerily quiet. Only security staff and overnight detention officers remained. Rachel flashed her attorney credentials and signed in, requesting immediate access to her client. The guard looked skeptical. Ma'am, it's past visiting hours. I am aware. I have reason to believe my client's safety may be compromised. I need to see him now. Compromised how? That's privileged. But if something happens to him while I'm being denied access, you're going to have some very uncomfortable questions to answer. The guard studied her face, then sighed. Wait here. 20 minutes later, Rachel was escorted to a private conference room. Ethan was brought in, still in orange detention scrubs, wrists cuffed. He looked surprised to see her. Rachel? It's midnight. I made the call. The Pentagon call. Ethan's expression shifted through several emotions at once. Relief. Concern. Something that might have been resignation. When, an hour ago, I spoke to a Commander Phillips, Naval Personnel Command. He said federal officers are coming. He said to keep eyes on you and not let anyone move you. Ethan sat down slowly. What exactly did he say when you used the code? He asked where you were, if you were injured, if you were in immediate danger. Then he said, I just triggered notifications that go to the Secretary of Defense. That sounds about right. Ethan, what is code Black Trident? Really? Ethan was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. It's an emergency protocol for operators who've been placed in classified deep cover or black operations. If something goes wrong, if we're compromised or in danger, that code signals that immediate extraction and protection protocols need to activate. So you really are that important. I was. 6 years ago. Now, he shook his head. Now I'm just a liability they thought they'd buried. Using that code, you just told them I'm still around. Still a problem. Good. Let them deal with it. Let them explain why someone with your service record is sitting in county lockup being assaulted by cops. It's not that simple. The people who want me gone, they're the same people who will hear about this call. They're going to move fast to contain it. Then federal officers get here first. Unless they don't. Rachel felt ice in her stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying that in the next few hours, things are going to happen very fast. People are going to make decisions. Some of those decisions might not be in my best interest. Then I'm not leaving. I'm staying right here until the Pentagon sends whoever they're sending. Ethan looked at her with something approaching admiration. You really don't back down, do you? Not when I'm right. They sat in silence for a while. Then Ethan said, Jackson would have done the same thing. Made the call. Forced the issue. He believed in dragging truth into the light, no matter the cost. Did it get him killed? Yes. But he knew the risks. Made the choice anyway. Some things are worth dying for. You're not dying. Not on my watch. Ethan smiled slightly. I believe you. Morning came with a tension Rachel could feel in her bones. She'd stayed at the courthouse all night, dozing in the conference room, while Ethan slept in his cell. The detention officers had given up trying to make her leave. At 7 in the morning, she bought terrible coffee from the courthouse vending machine and tried to make herself presentable. Her suit was wrinkled. Her eyes were bloodshot, but she was there. Court was scheduled to resume at 9. Hayes would present more witnesses. Brandt would testify again. The machinery of prosecution would grind forward, unless the Pentagon intervened first. At 8:30, Rachel noticed increased activity in the courthouse. Officers moving with purpose. Bailiffs talking in urgent whispers. Something was happening. At 8:45, she saw them. 2 men in dark civilian suits. Not FBI blazers. Not federal marshal jackets. Expensive, understated suits that screamed government but said nothing specific. They moved through security with credentials that made the guards straighten immediately. One of them scanned the hallway. His eyes landed on Rachel. He approached directly. Ms. Rachel Brennan? Yes. I'm Agent Morrison. This is Agent Kelly. We're with Naval Criminal Investigative Service. We need to speak with you and your client immediately. NCIS? I thought. The Pentagon requested our assistance in this matter. We need to interview Mr. Cole before court proceedings resume. Rachel's legal instincts kicked in. Not without me present. That's why we came to you first, counselor. Let's talk. They were escorted to a sealed conference room that Rachel had never even known existed in the courthouse. It was 3 levels below ground, accessed by elevator that required a key card. Ethan was brought down separately. When he saw the NCIS agents, his posture changed. Not afraid. Respectful. The way a soldier regards superior officers. Mr. Cole, Morrison said, pulling out a tablet. Can you confirm your service number? Ethan rattled off a series of numbers without hesitation. Morrison checked his tablet. Nodded. Can you confirm your last unit assignment? Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Team 7. Commanding Officer? Commander Jackson Hayes. Status. Killed in training exercise. June 2019. Morrison exchanged a glance with Kelly. Mr. Cole, we need you to detail the circumstances of your current detention. For the next hour, Ethan told them everything. The night with Lena. The arrest. Brandt's behavior. The evidence tampering. The systematic obstruction of his defense. Rachel supplemented with legal documentation. The denied motions. The delayed body cam footage. Hayes's warning call. The intimidation of witnesses. Morrison took notes. Asked pointed questions. His expression gave nothing away. When they finished, he closed his tablet. Ms. Brennan, has Judge Winters seen any documentation regarding Mr. Cole's military service? No. My motion to subpoena his records was denied yesterday without hearing. On what grounds? National security. The judge said it was beyond his jurisdiction. Morrison nodded slowly. That's interesting, because according to protocol, any judge handling a case involving a classified operator should have received a sealed briefing within hours of the motion being filed. The fact that didn't happen suggests the motion was intercepted before it reached the proper channels. Intercepted by who? That's what we're here to find out. Morrison stood. Court resumes in 30 minutes. We're going to be present. When Mr. Cole's case is called, do not be surprised by what happens next. What's going to happen? Justice Ms. Brennan. Delayed but arriving. At 9 o'clock sharp, Judge Winters took the bench. The courtroom was more crowded than usual. Word had spread that something unusual was happening with the Cole case. Brandt stood against the back wall with 4 other officers, arms crossed, looking smug. Hayes sat at the prosecution table, reviewing notes. Rachel sat at the defense table, Ethan beside her. His cuffs were still on, but he sat straighter than usual. Alert! Morrison and Kelly stood at the back of the courtroom, hands clasped in front of them. Waiting. The People versus Ethan Cole, the clerk called. Judge Winters looked up from his paperwork. Are we ready to proceed with? A bailiff hurried forward and whispered urgently in his ear. The judge's expression changed. Confusion, then concern, then something that might have been alarm. Your Honor, Morrison said, stepping forward. May I approach? Who are you? Special Agent Morrison, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. I have documentation relevant to this case that requires your immediate attention. Hayes shot to her feet. Your Honor, the prosecution objects to this irregular. Ms. Hayes, sit down. The judge's voice was sharp. Agent, approach. Morrison walked to the bench and handed the judge a sealed envelope. Behind it was a black folder embossed with a naval insignia Rachel didn't recognize. Judge Winters opened the envelope first. Read the first page. His face drained of color. He looked at Ethan, then at Morrison, then back at the document. His hands were shaking slightly as he turned to the second page. This is confirmed? He asked quietly. Yes, Your Honor. As of 0600 hours this morning, the Department of Defense has verified Mr. Cole's service record and current protected status. The judge set down the letter and opened the black folder. Whatever he saw there made him close his eyes briefly, as if processing something heavy. Hayes was on her feet again. Your Honor, the prosecution has a right to know what. Ms. Hayes. The judge's voice was steel. You'll know when I decide you need to know. Right now, I'm exercising judicial discretion regarding classified materials presented under federal authority. Sit down. Hayes sat, but her expression had shifted from irritation to genuine concern. Judge Winters removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, clearly buying time to compose himself. When he put them back on, his entire demeanor had changed. This was no longer a routine criminal proceeding. This court recognizes, he began, voice carrying to every corner of the room, that matters of national security sometimes intersect with civilian legal proceedings in ways that require extraordinary care and discretion. He looked directly at Ethan. It has been brought to my attention through verified federal channels that the defendant before me is not who the arrest report suggests. That his background includes service to this nation at the highest levels of military operations. That his record, while classified, reflects distinction, valor, and sacrifice that few of us in this room can fully comprehend. Whispers rippled through the gallery. Reporters were typing frantically. Brandt's face had gone from smug to confused to alarmed in the span of 30 seconds. Furthermore, the judge continued, it appears that key evidence in this case was either withheld or manipulated, that procedures designed to protect civilians were ignored, and that a decorated military operator was subjected to treatment that violates not only his rights as a defendant, but obligations this nation owes to those who serve in its darkest corners. He paused, letting that sink in. Bailiff, remove Mr. Cole's restraints. Immediately, gasps rippled through the gallery. Hayes stood again. Your Honor, the defendant is charged with. I'm aware of the charges, Ms. Hayes. Bailiff. Now. The bailiff hesitated, then moved forward. The click of the cuffs opening echoed unnaturally loud. For the first time since his arrest, Ethan stood in the courtroom completely free. Brandt pushed off the wall. You can't be serious. This is... Morrison turned and looked directly at Brandt. Said nothing. Just looked. Brandt's voice died. Judge Winters addressed the courtroom. It has come to my attention that evidence material to this case was withheld from a court. Additionally, the defendant's background contains information classified at federal level that bears directly on his character and credibility. He looked at Ethan with something approaching respect. Mr. Cole, on behalf of this court, I apologize for the treatment you've received. The charges against you are dismissed. Immediately, unconditionally, with prejudice. The courtroom exploded. Reporters pulled out phones. Spectators shouted questions. Hayes stood frozen at her table. Furthermore, the judge continued, voice rising. I am ordering a full investigation into the arrest procedures, evidence handling, and potential witness intimidation associated with this case. Any officer involved will be subject to internal affairs review pending federal oversight. Brandt's face turned gray. Ms. Brennan, your client is free to go. Agent Morrison, I assume you have additional business to conduct. Yes, Your Honor. We'll need to interview several individuals, starting with Officer Brandt. Morrison nodded to Kelly. They moved toward Brandt, who suddenly looked very small against the back wall. Officer Michael Brandt, Morrison said, voice carrying through the now silent courtroom. You're wanted for questioning regarding obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, assault on a federal asset, and conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law. You are not free to leave this courthouse. Brandt's expression cycled through denial, anger, and fear in rapid succession. Federal asset? He's a civilian. He's nobody. He's a decorated special warfare operator whose service record is sealed for national security reasons. Morrison interrupted. A fact that was made clear to your supervising officer, Captain Dennis Walsh, 3 days after his arrest through official federal channels. Yet his mistreatment continued. In fact, it escalated. Morrison pulled out his tablet, reading from it. You personally subjected Mr. Cole to physical assault in open court on 2 separate occasions. You tampered with body cam evidence, deleting audio that would have exonerated him. You intimidated a witness by having your patrol partners drive past her shelter with searchlights at 2 in the morning. Should I continue? Brandt said nothing. His jaw worked, but no words came out. We spent the last 18 hours pulling records. Officer Brandt, do you know what we found? Your uncle, retired Colonel Paul Brandt, was on the oversight committee that investigated the helicopter incident that killed Commander Jackson Hayes and 4 special warfare operators in 2019. Rachel's breath caught. Ethan had gone completely still beside her. That incident, Morrison continued, was ruled an accident after a 4-week investigation that concluded before forensic analysis was complete. Your uncle signed off on that finding. And now, 6 years later, you happen to arrest one of the surviving operators from that same unit? A man whose testimony could reopen questions about what really happened. Brandt's face had turned ashen. I didn't know who he was when I arrested him. Really? Because your patrol computer shows you ran his name through 3 separate databases, including one that requires federal clearance you shouldn't have access to. You knew exactly who he was, Officer Brandt. The question is what you plan to do with that information. 2 federal agents Rachel hadn't even noticed stepped forward, flanking Brandt. They weren't theatrical about it, just professionally blocked his exit routes. I want a lawyer, Brandt said, voice shaking now. All the arrogance had evaporated. Smart choice, Morrison replied. You're going to need a very good one. As the agents began escorting Brandt toward a side exit, away from the main courthouse traffic, Ethan spoke for the first time. Morrison. The agent paused and turned. His uncle, Colonel Brandt. Is he still alive? Yes. Tell him I remember. Tell him Jackson remembered. And tell him that every word of truth we kept buried is coming up now. Morrison nodded once. He'll be informed. The courtroom was in chaos now. Judge Winters was gaveling for order. Hayes had both hands on her table, looking like she might be sick. Reporters were shouting questions. Bailiffs were trying to restore control. Through it all, Ethan sat quietly, hands free of cuffs for the first time in weeks, watching everything with the calm of someone who'd waited a very long time for this moment. Rachel turned to Ethan. He was staring straight ahead, expression neutral, but she saw his hands trembling slightly. You're free, she said. It's over. No, Ethan said quietly. It's just beginning. They're going to want answers. About Jackson. About the mission. About everything I've kept quiet for 6 years. Will you give them? Ethan looked at Morrison, who was supervising Brandt's detention. Then at the judge. Then at the American flag behind the bench. Yeah, he said finally. I think I will. Morrison approached the defense table. Mr. Cole, we need you to come with us. Voluntary cooperation, but we have a lot to discuss. About what happened 6 years ago. About what's been happening for 6 years. The investigation into Commander Hayes' death was never truly closed. Just redirected. Your testimony might reopen some doors that powerful people wanted sealed. Will I be safe? Safer than you've been. You have my word. Ethan looked at Rachel. Thank you. For everything. For believing me. For making the call. I just did what you would have done. What Jackson would have done. Maybe. But not everyone does. Most people walk away when it gets dangerous. Ethan extended his hand. You didn't. That matters. Rachel shook his hand, then surprised herself by pulling him into a brief hug. Go tell him the truth. All of it. It's time. Yes, ma'am. Morrison led Ethan toward the exit. Kelly followed with another agent. As they passed Brant, who was now being read his rights, Ethan paused. Brant looked up, met his eyes, and for the first time, Rachel saw genuine fear there. Ethan said nothing, just looked at him the way Morrison had looked at him earlier, the way operators look at threats they've neutralized. Then he walked out, flanked by federal protection, no longer in cuffs, no longer invisible. The courtroom slowly emptied. Hayes gathered her files with shaking hands. Judge Winters sat at his bench, staring at the sealed documents Morrison had provided. Rachel packed up her briefcase, exhausted but somehow energized. She'd started this case with an overworked public defender's cynicism. She was ending it with renewed faith that sometimes, rarely, the system actually worked. Not because it was designed to, but because people like Ethan refused to stay silent. And people like her refused to stop fighting. Outside the courthouse, rain had started falling again. Rachel stood on the steps, letting it cool her face. Somewhere in a federal building, Ethan was telling his story. The real story. About Jackson. About the mission. About 7 men who died because political interests had overridden operational reality. Somewhere else, Brant was realizing that the man he'd kicked and mocked had been protected at levels he couldn't imagine. And that protection had finally arrived. Rachel thought about the tattoo on Ethan's arm. The names encoded there. The men who hadn't come home. They couldn't be here to see this moment. Couldn't see their brother vindicated. Couldn't know that their deaths might finally be investigated honestly. But Rachel believed they have approved. Jackson, especially. The team leader who'd refused to stay quiet. Who'd asked the questions that got him killed. He had been proud of Ethan. For surviving. For enduring. For finally, after 6 years of silence, deciding that some truths had to be told. Rachel walked to her car, already planning her next case. Already thinking about the next client who needs someone to believe them when no one else would. This was what justice looked like when it actually worked. Messy, delayed, imperfect, but arriving nonetheless. She thought about Ethan's word from their first meeting. I didn't hurt anyone who didn't deserve protecting. He'd been right. And now, finally, the system had caught up to that truth. Because that's what she did. That's who she was. And nothing that had happened in the last week had changed that. If anything, it had reinforced it, made it clearer than ever before. Some fights were worth having. Some truths were worth the cost of fighting for. And some people, no matter how much power tried to erase them, refused to disappear quietly. Rachel smiled and drove away into the rain. The story wasn't over, but this chapter was complete. The weeks following the courtroom revelation moved with the inexorable momentum of truth, long suppressed, finally breaking free. Rachel watched from the sidelines as federal investigations expanded in concentric circles, pulling in officers, administrators, and military personnel who'd thought themselves safely insulated from consequences. Brant was the first domino. Within 72 hours of his detention, he'd retained one of the most expensive defense attorneys in the state and refused all interviews. But his silence couldn't stop the evidence Morrison's team was uncovering. The body cam footage, once corrupted, was fully recovered from backup servers Brant hadn't known existed. It showed everything. Ethan with hands raised, identifying himself as the 911 caller. Lena crying and pointing at her attackers. Brant ordering his partner to kill the audio before they rushed Ethan. The kicks, the insults, the deliberate escalation. The footage went viral within days. National news picked it up. Decorated Navy SEAL assaulted by police dominated headlines. Civil rights organizations demanded action. Veterans groups called for accountability. But the real earthquake came 3 weeks later. The Inspector General's report on the 2019 helicopter incident was quietly declassified and released to congressional oversight committees. What had been ruled a training accident was now revealed as something far more troubling. Commander Jackson Hayes and his team had been scheduled for a routine training exercise. But hours before the flight, new orders came through unofficial channels redirecting them to a secondary location. The helicopter that was supposed to carry them had been replaced with an older model due to reported maintenance issues with their assigned aircraft. That older model had crashed, killing all aboard. The maintenance logs for their original helicopter showed no issues. The redirect orders came from an IP address traced to the Pentagon, but the authorization codes didn't match any official command structure. An investigation that followed had been rushed through by a committee that included Colonel Paul Brandt, who had financial ties to the defense contractor that built the helicopter. It wasn't proof of murder. Not quite, but it was evidence of negligence so egregious it bordered on criminality. And it meant that Jackson Hayes had died not in an accident, but in a cascade of failures that someone had worked very hard to bury. Rachel learned all this from news reports like everyone else. She hadn't heard from Ethan since the courthouse. Morrison had taken him into federal protection, and NCIS kept their witnesses close. But 6 weeks after the dismissal, her phone rang with an unknown number. "Rachel? It's Ethan." His voice sounded different, lighter, like he'd set down weight he'd been carrying for years. "Ethan, how are you?" "Free. Really free. For the first time since Jackson died." He paused. "I wanted to thank you for believing me, for making that call, for fighting when I'd almost given up fighting. You never gave up. You just needed someone to help carry it. Maybe. Listen, there's going to be a memorial for Jackson and the others. Congressional recognition. Grupe honors. The families have been notified about what really happened. They deserve to know their sons didn't die because of pilot error or equipment failure. They died because someone made decisions that valued politics over lives." Rachel felt tears threatening. "When is it?" 2 months. Arlington. Full military honors. "I'd like you to be there. If you're willing, I'll be there." "Good." "And Rachel? They're reopening the investigation. Real investigation this time. I've testified for 18 hours over the past month. Told them everything. The mission, the orders, the inconsistencies, all of it. Will it lead to charges? Maybe. Probably not the ones who gave the orders. They're too insulated. But the people who covered it up, the ones who rushed the investigation and sealed the records, some of them are going to face consequences, including Colonel Brandt, especially him. His nephew's case opened doors that led straight back to his office. Turns out when you start pulling threads, whole systems unravel. They talked for another 20 minutes. Ethan told her about the small town he'd moved to, a place near a lake where he helped at a community center teaching kids to swim. He sounded peaceful in a way she'd never heard during those tense courthouse meetings. Before they hung up, he said something that stayed with her. "You know what Jackson used to say? He'd say that truth is patient. It waits in the dark for someone brave enough to strike a match. You struck that match, Rachel. Whatever comes from this, whatever justice finally arrives, it's because you refuse to let them keep the lights off." 2 months later, Rachel stood in Arlington National Cemetery under a gray November sky. The memorial service was small, dignified, and heavy with the weight of years-delayed recognition. 7 headstones, 7 families, 7 men whose names Ethan had carried encoded on his arm because he believed no one else would remember them properly. Now they were being remembered by the Navy, by Congress, by the nation they'd served in silence. The ceremony was more than just military protocol. It was acknowledgement, recognition that these men hadn't died in a random training accident, but as a consequence of failures that had been deliberately hidden. Their families had spent 6 years believing their sons had died because of bad luck or pilot error. Now they knew the truth was more complex and more painful. Rachel recognized several of the families from news coverage. Jackson Hayes' parents, elderly but dignified, standing beside his widow and 2 teenage daughters who'd grown up without a father. Marcus Thompson's brother, himself a Marine, in dress blues with a chest full of ribbons. David Park's mother, a small Korean woman who kept touching the headstone like she still couldn't believe her son was really gone. Each family had been told the full story now. Not the sanitized version, not the convenient lie. The truth about the mission that went wrong, the intelligence failures, the political interference, the rushed investigation that had protected careers instead of seeking justice. Some were angry. Some were resigned. All were grateful that finally, after 6 years, someone was telling them the truth. Ethan stood in his dress uniform, the first time Rachel had seen him in military attire. The uniform fit perfectly, creased and pressed, ribbons aligned precisely across his chest. He looked different, older, somehow, but also more settled. Like he'd finally found his place again after years of drifting without anchor or purpose. The scars she'd seen in the booking photos were hidden now, but she knew they were there. Physical scars from operations he'd never talk about. Emotional scars from watching his brothers die and being forced to stay silent about what really happened. Admiral Patricia Morrison, no relation to Agent Morrison, but equally committed to justice, presided over the ceremony. She'd been one of the officials who'd pushed for the investigation to be reopened, who'd read Ethan's testimony and recognized it for what it was. Not the complaints of a disgruntled veteran, but the carefully documented observations of a trained operator who'd seen systemic failure up close. The men we honor today, the Admiral said, her voice carrying across the cemetery, did not die because they failed. They died because the system designed to protect them failed. They died because people in positions of authority made decisions that prioritized political convenience over operational safety. They died because when Commander Hayes began asking difficult questions about those decisions, he became inconvenient. She let that word hang in the November air. Inconvenient. That's what these 7 men became. Not heroes, not warriors, not the fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands their families knew them to be. Just inconvenient obstacles to people who wanted mistakes buried rather than corrected. The families were crying now, not with fresh grief that had been worn smooth by 6 years of mourning, but with the pain of knowing their loved ones' deaths could have been prevented, should have been prevented. Today, we correct that injustice, the Admiral continued. Not fully. Nothing can bring these men back. Nothing can restore the years their families lost. But we can acknowledge the truth. We can honor their service properly. We can ensure that their sacrifice and the circumstances surrounding their deaths are never forgotten or buried again. She turned to Ethan. Petty Officer Cole, would you please come forward? When they called him forward to speak, he approached the podium with the same measured calm she remembered from the courthouse. But his eyes were bright with emotion barely contained. Jackson Hayes was my team leader, he began, voice steady. But he was more than that. He was my friend, my brother, the man who taught me that following orders and doing what's right aren't always the same thing. The families listened, some crying, some stoic, all focused entirely on his words. When our mission went wrong, Jackson could have stayed quiet, could have accepted the official story and moved on. But he couldn't let it go. He'd seen what we'd seen, knew what we knew, and he believed that truth mattered more than career, more than safety, more than the comfortable lie. Ethan's voice cracked slightly. It got him killed, got these 6 other good men killed. But his choice, his refusal to let injustice stand, that wasn't wrong. That was everything we were trained to be. Warriors who protect the innocent. Soldiers who serve the truth, not just the mission. He looked at the headstones. For 6 years, I stayed quiet, told myself I was honoring their sacrifice by surviving, by not making waves. But I was wrong. The real way to honor them was to finish what Jackson started, to make sure their deaths meant something, to ensure that the people who sent them into that helicopter face consequences. Rachel wiped her eyes. Around her, she saw admirals, senators, defense officials, people with power who'd finally been forced to pay attention. So today, Ethan continued, we're not just remembering 7 men who died. We're recognizing 7 men who lived with honor, served with distinction, and died because someone valued convenience over conscience. Their families deserve better. They deserve better. And I promise you, their deaths will not be forgotten again. He saluted. The gesture was crisp, perfect, carrying years of training and emotion. Around him, uniforms saluted back. Civilians placed hands over hearts. And for a moment, the gray sky and November cold couldn't diminish the sense that something important had been acknowledged. Something true had been spoken. Something long buried had finally been honored properly. After the ceremony, families approached Ethan one by one, thanking him, hugging him, telling him their sons would have been proud of what he'd done. Rachel hung back, giving them space. But eventually, Ethan found her near the edge of the gathering. "You came," he said. "I said I would." They stood together quietly, watching the families place flowers on the graves. The November wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of rain. "What happens now?" Rachel asked. "For you." Ethan smiled. "I keep teaching kids to swim. Help out at the community center. Maybe get a dog. Live the quiet life I kept telling myself I wanted." "Think you can handle quiet? After everything?" "I don't know, but I'm going to try." He looked at her. "What about you? Still fighting impossible cases?" "Always. That's the job. It's more than a job for you. Same as service was more than a job for me. It's who you are." Rachel considered that. Maybe, or maybe I just believe some people deserve someone in their corner. And I'm good at being in corners. The best I've seen. They walked slowly back toward the parking area. Behind them, the memorial continued. Families gathering, stories being shared, 7 men being remembered properly at last. "Brant took a plea deal," Ethan said. 20 months federal prison for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and assault. His uncle is facing congressional hearings. Probably won't serve time, but his reputation is destroyed. The defense contractor lost their Pentagon contracts. Several oversight committee members resigned. Is that justice? It's something. More than we had 6 weeks ago. Less than they deserved. But that's how it works, right? You fight for perfect justice and settle for partial accountability. Sounds about right. They reached Rachel's car. She unlocked it, but didn't get in immediately. "Ethan, can I ask you something? When you're in that cell, being kicked, being humiliated, did you ever think about fighting back? Really fighting back?" He was quiet for a moment. "Every day. I could have hurt Brant badly. Could have made him regret ever touching me. But I knew what would happen if I did. They'd use it to prove I was dangerous. Use it to justify everything. So I took it. Because sometimes taking the hit and staying standing sends a stronger message than throwing the punch. That takes discipline most people don't have. It's what Jackson taught us. Control is strength. Patience is power. And sometimes the best way to win is to let your enemy defeat himself." Rachel thought about that. About Brant's arrogance leading to his downfall. About the covered-up investigation unraveling because Ethan had waited for the right moment to speak. About truth proving more powerful than corruption when given enough time. He was a good teacher. The best. Rachel finally climbed into her car. Before she closed the door, Ethan leaned down. "If you ever need anything, call me." "I mean it. You saved my life, Rachel. Not just in court. You reminded me that fighting for what's right still matters. That some battles are worth having even when you're outnumbered. You did the same for me. Reminded me why I became a lawyer in the first place." They shook hands. Then impulsively, Rachel hugged him briefly. "Take care of yourself, Ethan Cole." "You too, Rachel Brennan." She drove away from Arlington, leaving him standing in the November afternoon, surrounded by memory and peace. The story could have ended there. But 3 months later, Rachel received a package at her office. Inside was a folded American flag, the kind presented at military funerals. This was Jackson's. His family wanted you to have it. They said you finished what he started, that you were the lawyer he would have chosen. I agree. Use it to remember that some truths are worth the cost. Some fights are worth taking. And some people, no matter how hard power tries to silence them, refuse to stay quiet forever. Thank you for striking the match. Rachel hung the flag in her office, right behind her desk, where she could see it every day. It became her reminder. When cases felt hopeless, when clients seemed doomed, when systems appeared too corrupt to challenge, she'd look at that flag and remember a man who'd stayed silent for 6 years until someone believed in him enough to make one phone call. She'd remember 7 men who'd died for truth. She'd remember a team leader who'd refused to let injustice stand. And she'd remember that sometimes when you're outnumbered and outgunned and facing systems designed to crush you, the most radical act is simply refusing to surrender. Years later, when law students asked her about the Cole case, she'd tell them the whole story. The kick in the courtroom, the sealed records, the Pentagon call at midnight, the moment truth finally overwhelmed power. And she'd always end the same way. Justice isn't guaranteed. It's not automatic. It doesn't arrive because systems are designed well or because good people hope really hard. It arrives when someone decides the cost of fighting is worth paying. When someone looks at injustice and says, "Not on my watch." That's what Ethan did. That's what Jackson did. And that's what we're called to do every single day we walk into a courtroom. The flag hung behind her through hundreds of cases, thousands of clients, decades of fighting systems that didn't want to change. It reminded her why the work mattered. And it reminded her that sometimes, in the darkness where truth waits patiently, all it takes is one person brave enough to strike a match. She'd struck that match for Ethan Cole, and the light it created had illuminated more than just one case. It had exposed an entire network of buried secrets, convenient lies, and institutional failures. It had brought honor to 7 men who'd been forgotten. It had given families closure they'd been denied for years. Most importantly, it had proven that even against overwhelming power, even against systems designed to crush dissent, even against enemies with resources and connections and authority, one person refusing to back down could change everything. Rachel Brennan had been that person, and the flag behind her desk made sure she never forgot it. The story of Ethan Cole spread through legal communities, military circles, and civil rights organizations. It became a case study in wrongful prosecution, a cautionary tale about abuse of power, an example of what happens when classified operations intersect with civilian justice. But for Rachel, it remained simpler than all that. It was the case where she'd learned that sometimes the most important victories are the ones nobody expects you to win. The battles where you're outmatched, outspent, and facing opponents who think they're untouchable. Those are the fights worth having. Those are the truths worth the cost. And those are the moments that define not just a career, but a life spent in service of something larger than yourself. Ethan had taught her that. Jackson had proven it. And 7 fallen warriors had paid for it with their lives. Rachel made sure their sacrifice meant something. Every case, every client, every fight, that was her promise. That was her purpose. And that was enough. If respect only comes after discovering someone's title or background, was it ever really respect at all? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories about justice, dignity, and the truth that refuses to stay buried.